The elderly man walked slowly down the jet bridge, escorted off the plane like a criminal. His faded military jacket hung loose on tired shoulders. Behind him, passengers whispered to each other, pulling out their phones to record the scene. A businessman in first class leaned back with a satisfied smirk. Finally, he muttered. The gate agent's voice crackled over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay." The man's weathered hands gripped a small duffel bag. He didn't argue. He didn't make a scene. His eyes were calm but exhausted, the look of someone used to being invisible. He reached the terminal and the plane doors closed behind him. The engines hummed. Passengers settled back into their seats, already forgetting him. But 4 to 7 minutes later, air traffic control received an order that would stop everyone in their tracks. 3 hours earlier, the airport was just beginning to wake up. Daniel Cross stood at the check-in counter with a paper ticket in his hand. No smartphone. No priority boarding pass. No rush. The agent looked at the ticket twice, surprised anyone still traveled this way. He was in his late 60s, dressed in jeans, worn boots, and that faded military jacket. The insignia on the sleeve was so old you could barely make it out. He waited patiently while families and business travelers pushed past him, dragging expensive luggage and barking into wireless earbuds. At the gate, Daniel found a seat away from the crowd. He pulled out a worn paperback about the Cold War and started reading. Around him, the terminal buzzed with noise and impatience. He didn't seem to notice. A young mother nearby struggled with 2 small children and an avalanche of carry-on bags. A stuffed bear tumbled to the floor near Daniel's feet. He bent down slowly, picked it up, and handed it back with a quiet smile. "Thank you so much," she said, flustered. Daniel noticed her struggling with an overhead bag. Without a word, he stood and lifted it into place for her. She thanked him again. He simply nodded and returned to his book. No one else looked his way. When boarding began, Daniel waited until the very end. He walked down the aisle and settled into seat 16A, a middle seat in economy. The flight attendant offered him water. "Thank you, he said softly. His voice was calm, respectful. She smiled and moved on. If you looked closely, you'd notice his hands. Scarred. Steady. The kind of hands that had carried weight others couldn't imagine. On his wrist was a military watch, scratched and decades old. But no one looked closely. In a world obsessed with status and noise, Daniel Cross was invisible. 20 minutes before departure, a voice cut through the cabin like a knife. "Excuse me. Excuse me." Marcus Wendell stood in first class, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, his face twisted in irritation. He pointed toward the front lavatory. "I paid for first class, and I shouldn't have to watch economy passengers parade through here like it's a public restroom." The flight attendant, a young woman barely out of training, flushed red. "Sir, I'll handle it." Marcus wasn't satisfied. "You need to make an announcement. This is unacceptable." Flustered and embarrassed, she picked up the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please use the lavatories in your designated cabin." Daniel was returning from the front lavatory when Marcus spotted him. "That guy. Right there." He pointed directly at Daniel. "He was just up here. Probably doesn't even know basic airplane etiquette." The flight attendant approached Daniel, her voice apologetic but firm. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to return to your seat and remain there." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, No argument. No defense." He turned and walked back toward economy. Marcus leaned over to the passenger beside him, his voice loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "It's always the budget travelers who think rules don't apply to them. No respect." Someone in the row behind pulled out their phone. Another passenger laughed. Daniel kept walking, his face expressionless. Then Marcus noticed the jacket. His eyes narrowed. "Nice costume, buddy," he called out. "Stolen Vela much? I see those military fakes at airports all the time." Daniel's jaw tightened, just slightly. But he said nothing. He reached his seat and sat down. The cabin hummed with uncomfortable tension. People whispered. Phones stayed raised. The flight attendant stood frozen, caught between corporate policy and what felt deeply wrong. Her phone buzzed. She answered, listened, and her face went pale. She walked to the cockpit, then returned with security officers. They approached row 16. "Sir," one officer said quietly to Daniel. "We're going to need you to gather your belongings and come with us." The entire cabin fell silent. Daniel looked up at the officer. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, not anger, but a deep, bone-tired sadness. He stood slowly, deliberately. He reached for his duffel bag. Every eye in the cabin watched. No one spoke. No one moved. Daniel walked down the aisle with quiet dignity, security trailing behind him. Marcus settled back into his seat with a satisfied smile, already ordering champagne. The passengers returned to their phones and magazines. Within minutes, they'd forget the old man in the faded jacket. But they shouldn't have. At the gate desk, the agent scanned Daniel's ticket and ID for processing. Her eyes moved across the screen. Then stopped. She read it again. Her expression shifted from routine boredom to confusion, then concern. She looked up at Daniel, then back at the screen. "Sir, this ticket was issued by the Department of Defense." Her voice dropped. Are you military?" Daniel met her eyes calmly. "Was. Long time ago." She stared at him for a moment longer, then picked up the phone. "I need to call my supervisor. Can you wait here, please?" Daniel nodded. Behind him, through the gate window, he could see the plane. Passengers settled into their seats. Flight attendants prepared the cabin. Marcus Wendell reclined in first class, champagne already in hand, scrolling through his phone with a satisfied smirk. In the cockpit, the captain ran through his pre-flight checklist. His radio crackled. "Flight 447, this is ground control. Stand by. Do not push back. Repeat, do not push back." The captain frowned. "We're cleared for departure. What's going on?" Ground control didn't answer immediately. Just, stand by. 300 miles away, inside the Pentagon, a phone rang in a quiet office. A hand grabbed it. "Cross is traveling commercial," a stern voice demanded. "Find out what plane he's on. Now." At JFK Ground Control, a supervisor pulled up security footage and passenger manifests. He typed in Daniel's name. The system flagged immediately. Red text filled the screen. A clearance code. A security level. The kind that shouldn't exist for someone who's supposedly retired. The supervisor grabbed his radio. "We have a situation." Back at the gate, the agent returned. Her entire demeanor had changed. No more casual politeness. She looked almost frightened. "Mr. Cross, I need you to stay right here. Please don't go anywhere." Daniel sensed something was wrong. His eyes drifted to the window. The plane sat motionless at the gate, engines running, but going nowhere. Inside the cabin, passengers checked their watches. A baby cried. Someone complained loudly. Marcus tapped his armrest impatiently. The flight attendant's phone rang. She answered, listened, and the color drained from her face. She walked straight to first class and stopped beside Marcus. "Sir, I need to speak with you privately." Marcus waved her off without looking up. "I'm busy." Her voice was firmer now. "Sir, I insist." He glanced up, annoyed. But something in her expression made him pause. Outside, the plane remained frozen. In the cockpit, the captain's radio crackled to life. The voice that came through was different. Formal. Military. "Flight 447, this is North American Aerospace Defense Command. You are ordered to return to gate immediately. Priority 1 directive. Passenger Daniel Cross must be located and escorted without delay." The cockpit went dead silent. The captain stared at his co-pilot. NORAD. The military command responsible for protecting North American airspace. They don't contact commercial flights. Ever. "Confirm that message," the captain said, his voice tight. "Confirmed. NORAD Priority 1. Return to gate." The captain picked up the cabin intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been ordered to return to the gate. We apologize for the inconvenience and will update you shortly." In first class, Marcus Wendell groaned loudly. "You've got to be kidding me. This is absolutely ridiculous." Other passengers shifted in their seats, checking phones, muttering complaints. At the gate, 2 figures in uniform appeared. Not airport security. Air Force officers in full dress uniform. They walked with purpose, scanning the terminal. They spotted Daniel standing near the desk. Both men stopped. And saluted. Crisp. Respectful. Military precision. "Colonel Cross," one of them said. "Sir, we've been sent to escort you." The gate agent's mouth fell open. "Colonel." Around them, travelers slowed. Heads turned. Phones lifted. The second officer spoke quickly. "Sir, your presence is required for an emergency classified briefing at Peterson Space Force Base. A military transport is being prepared. We were unaware you were traveling commercially." Daniel exhaled slowly. For the first time, emotion crossed his face. Not anger. Exhaustion. I was visiting my daughter in San Diego. I didn't think anyone would. Sir, the officer interrupted gently, the situation requires your immediate expertise. We have direct orders from Northcom Command. Daniel nodded. He understood. On the plane, the flight attendant walked down the aisle with the captain at her side. They stopped at Marcus's seat. Sir, she said quietly, you filed a complaint against passenger Daniel Cross that resulted in his removal from this aircraft. Marcus looked up, still smug. Yeah. And? The captain's voice cut like steel. You had a decorated Air Force colonel and former NORAD operations commander removed from this flight for suspicious behavior. Marcus's face went white. Passengers in nearby rows turned to stare. Someone whispered, wait, what? The captain continued, his tone ice cold. I've been flying for 23 years. I've never been more ashamed of a passenger's conduct in my entire career. Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. A passenger across the aisle pulled out her phone. But this time, the camera pointed at Marcus. That guy got a war hero kicked off the plane. Someone said loud enough for everyone to hear. The captain leaned in slightly. We've been ordered to delay departure indefinitely while this situation is resolved. The man you mocked has a higher security clearance than anyone on this aircraft. Including me. Marcus tried to sink into his seat. The flight attendant added softly, but loud enough for first class to hear, the military doesn't stop commercial planes for just anyone, sir. The cabin was completely silent. Every eye in first class was on Marcus now. And not one of them looked friendly. The Air Force officers escorted Daniel through the terminal. Travelers stepped aside, staring. Some whispered. A few nodded respectfully. Daniel walked with the same quiet stride he'd had all morning. But as they passed the gate window, he stopped. Through the glass, he could see Flight 447 still sitting on the tarmac. Engines running. Going nowhere. He turned to the officers. The other passengers on that plane. They shouldn't be delayed because of this. The younger officer glanced at his partner. Sir, it's protocol. NORAD's orders. Daniel looked back at the plane. Somewhere inside were families trying to get home. Business travelers with meetings. That young mother with 2 tired kids. He shook his head. Can you relay a message? Tell them to proceed with departure. Whatever situation you need me for, I'll handle it. But those people have families waiting. The officers exchanged a look. Even now, even in the middle of a national security response, he was thinking about strangers on a plane. The senior officer nodded. I'll make the call, sir. Inside the cockpit, the captain's radio crackled. He listened, then picked up the intercom. His voice was steady, but something had shifted in his tone. Respect. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Cross has personally requested that we continue our departure without further delay. On behalf of the entire crew, I want to say we were honored to have him booked on this flight. And we apologize for failing to recognize his service. Silence. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone clapped. Then another. Then more. The applause spread through the cabin like a wave. Even passengers in first class joined in, though most of them carefully avoided looking at Marcus Wendell. The captain wasn't finished. To the individual who filed the complaint, I suggest you use this flight time to reflect on what real character looks like. Marcus sat frozen. His champagne sat untouched on the armrest. Around him, passengers stared. No one said a word, but the judgment was deafening. In the back of economy, an elderly man with a faded navy ball cap slowly stood. He faced the cockpit window and raised his hand in a crisp salute. Outside, Daniel walked toward a waiting black SUV with government plates. As he passed through the terminal, he saw her. The young mother from earlier. She was standing near a TV screen, her kids distracted with tablets. News coverage played, breaking, military operation halts commercial flight at JFK. She looked up and recognized him immediately. That was you, she said softly. You're the one who helped me with my bags. Daniel smiled, the same gentle smile from before. Just wanted to help. She stepped forward and touched his arm. Her eyes were wet. Thank you. For everything. He nodded once, then continued toward the vehicle. Still humble. Still quiet. Still the same man, even though the world now knew his name. In a world that measures worth by appearance, volume, and status, we forget that the quietest people often carry the heaviest burdens. Daniel Cross served 32 years in the Air Force, overseeing operations that kept millions safe. Operations so classified that most will never know his name. He never asked for recognition. He never demanded respect. He simply lived with honor. That afternoon, 2 planes left JFK Airport. A military transport climbed into the sky, carrying a man the nation needed but rarely remembered. Minutes later, Flight 447 finally departed, carrying passengers who would never forget the lesson they learned on the ground. Humility isn't weakness. It's strength refined by sacrifice. And respect isn't given based on the seat you occupy, but the life you've lived when no one was watching. Before you judge someone by their appearance or status, remember this: you have no idea what battles they've fought or what mountains they've moved in silence. If this story reminded you to look deeper and treat everyone with dignity, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And to every veteran reading this, whether your service was seen or invisible, celebrated or forgotten, thank you. We see you.